My name is
Jenny.
David.
Lila.
Laurel.
Jen.
Lisa.
Dino.
Hari.
Kyle.
I was a
Jehovah's Witness.
Jehovah's Witness.
FLDS.
In the Amish church.
The chosen people.
I was a Scientologist.
I grew up a Mooney, a member of the Unification Church.
2x2.
And I am
Shunned.
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 Hi, I'm Tara. I'm 39 years old, and I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and I am shunned.
All right, Tara. So how did you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
I was raised in. My parents, well, my great grandparents on both sides were Jehovah's Witnesses, so it goes back several generations on both sides.
Oh, wow. Okay. So do you know, did you all have lore? Was there an origin story of this in your family?
Yeah, so my dad's side, my grandma and my great grandma, everybody lived next door to each other. So my grandparents lived next door, and then my great grandparents lived in the house that I grew up in. So it was kind of, yeah. But they got contacted in the 60s and door to door. And only my grandmothers became witnesses. My grandfathers never took to it. So they were really the matriarchs of my dad's side. But my grandma took all of the kids. She had 4 little kids at the time. My dad was the third of 4. She took them all. My grandpa was never like violently opposed. My great grandfather was opposed, but they were grown at that time, so it was kind of irrelevant for that. And I never met my great grandfather. He passed away before I was born. But yeah, so my grandma took them by herself to the meetings, to the congregation that I grew up in. So my dad grew up in the same congregation that I also grew up in.
Oh, wow.
And then my mom's side, I don't really know the story. There's a lot of family secrets, but my great grandfather was a witness and my great grandmother was not. So it was kind of opposite on that side. So yeah, yeah.
So it was the like you said, the matriarchs, the grandmothers, so to speak, that
Yep.
And all just kind of through the ministry in general, or
Yep.
were there things? Do you know, were there things going on in their lives back then? Oftentimes there's some sort of a vulnerability. There's somebody just had a kid, or there's a war, or they lost a job, or a divorce, or moved.
My grandfathers were not the nicest people.
Mhm.
I know that my great grandfather, like I said, never met him, but I've heard that he was not super kind and he was abusive to everybody, pretty much everybody around him. My grandfather was not much better. I just remember him yelling a lot and being very grumpy. I can't imagine being my grandma with 4 little kids with my grandpa. So I think it was really, for my grandma, a place that she felt safe, and she felt that way up until her passing earlier this year. Like, she was very, very much a staunch Jehovah's Witness, and like really that was where her comfort was. And I think back in the 50s and 60s, that was kind of her only option at that point. She wasn't working. She was a stay-at-home mom. She didn't have a whole, it was what it was. And I think that she found community there. The person who contacted her, they became very good friends. They studied, and they were friends up until, she's still alive, the lady that contacted them in the ministry. And they lived on the same street for my whole life. So they were friends up until my grandma's death. So I think for her, it was friendship, and having a bunch of little kids that didn't really have playmates. She wanted them to be raised right.
Wow, it sounds like there's a lot of I don't know what word I'm looking for, stability or longevity in the witnesses for your family, like people living on same streets and continued relationships throughout their lives, and so it's really been a fixture in the family.
Oh yeah, it was like a big, like they call this, their spiritual heritage. I was
Yeah.
really, really proud of that. Like, I was like, yeah, go back generations on both sides. Like, and I was like the oldest of the cousins on both sides. And I was just really proud of that for my family. I thought it was something really great for us.
Well, sure. So then, being raised in it, it really being all you ever knew, and I guess feeling some of that generational pride, or the pride of family ownership of this thing, so to speak. Um, while growing up in it, how did it make you see yourself in the world around you?
That's such a great question because it's like I didn't really see the world around me. So I wasn't really allowed to. Like now, yeah,
Oh,
you're
I like that answer.
like
Yeah.
I was very much in my own little world and in my own little bubble. I was also an only child, so I was fortunately my congregation had a lot of kids, so I had like friends and stuff, which I know a lot of people are not lucky to have kids their own age. I was, but I only knew those kids. Like I only knew what was going on in my world. The people were the only people I was around. Even my family members who were not witnesses, I wasn't really around them either. I knew that everything inside was good and everything outside was bad, or dangerous, or scary, or something that was to not be messed with. um, Even like going to school, like this girl lived 2 doors down from me. We went to the same school for most of my life, but like we weren't friends. So I'm like, we should have been friends. But I wasn't allowed to go over to her house. She wasn't allowed to come over to our house. Like it was one of those things. My parents were really strict on association, and on like entertainment. So I was very much for until I got my own car, I was very much in my own little like life bubble.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I get that. I mean, yeah, wow, you're just kind of wrapped up in this thing and the world outside ceases to exist to some degree. So were you afraid? I mean, were you afraid of the world outside at all? Did fear
No,
come into play or was it just kind of oblivion as far as that goes?
I actually was not scared of the world. My mom really wanted to homeschool me. I remember like I don't remember a whole lot from my childhood, but I remember having this argument with her when I was 5 because I really wanted to go to school and she wanted to homeschool me. I made the argument at 5 years old that if I didn't go into school and be with the worldly kids, that I would not learn how to stand up for myself in the real world. And that was my argument to be able to go to public school. So I was able to go to public school. Um, but I was not really afraid of it. I felt like I was strong and I was prepared to fight. Like I was ready to like, I had my armor on. Like I was like, yes,
Your
little 5 year
spiritual
old.
armor.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, I was the one that brought the little brochure to my teachers and like the school brochure and like talked to them about the holidays. Like I did all that stuff. My mom, like they did too, but they were never like speak for me. Like I was very much an outspoken little zealous child. So it was more of like, I'm ready for this danger.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that then. So what was school like for you? You know, that environment, obviously you were advocating for it and you wanted to go and kind of test and prove yourself to some degree. Um, Being that kid wanting to go in and do that, um, how did that work out for you? I mean, did doing so create ostracism and you were on the outs all the time, or did you have friends? Did you feel comfortable at all at school?
I really liked school. Being around other kids was great for me because I was very isolated, and I did have friends, but they were very like a small group, and it was the same people all the time. And they were all in my school too. So, but they were all year 2 younger than me. So I was the only one in my grade. I was the oldest of like our little friend group. So I was always 1 year ahead. So I was able to kind of test the waters, so to speak, for all the other kids that came behind me. But like, so the teachers were prepared. And then in 5th grade, I had a witness as a teacher, so that was worked out for me in that
Wow.
aspect. But like I loved going to. I was a big reader, so when holidays and birthdays came up, I was like, I get to go to the library. This is fantastic. And then when they got computers, I was just like, Oregon Trail, yes, please. So we went to like, I was excited to do these things and I stood up for like little kids. Like I felt really good about being a kid. Like school gave me a lot of confidence. Um, and I was not super, I was very secretive about what happened at school. I didn't really talk to my parents much about it because I felt like that was my place. And it wasn't like I wasn't preaching to a bunch of kids. Like once I started going to school and I got like as I grew up, I was like, wow, I really need to become myself because I was not, I wasn't a little zealous kid. I thought I was. I started.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can see already, it sounds like there's a little bit of a theme. You were outspoken. You used your voice and advocated for whether it was what you thought was right, which was, being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, the truth, or whether it was just advocating for another kid who was getting bullied, or whether it was advocating to go to school in the first place. Sounds like from a young age you kind of did have a voice.
I did. And I know, like, I was that kid that questioned everything too. I know I drove my parents crazy. My parents were also very young parents. My mom was 18 when I was born, and my dad was 22. So they were very young parents, and I don't think they knew what to do with me half the time. Honestly, they just because I asked so many questions, and people in the congregation will still talk about how much I like how outspoken I was. Not always good in a good way. But people like still tell me, you were loud as a baby. And it's like, I'm not that way anymore, but I've always been the person to speak up, even in like when we were setting like the four cardinal attributes of, Jehovah, it was love, justice, power, and wisdom. And my favorite, and they were like, what's your favorite attribute? And I would be like, love. And I was the only one that ever said justice. Because that was my favorite attribute. I love the fact that, like, no, you're not going to get away with all this garbage, and he's going to hold you accountable. Accountability was really important to me when I was a kid, apparently.
Interesting. Accountability was important. Was that, well, I mean, I think that a lot of people, honestly, who are Jehovah's Witnesses, they have this this sense of wanting to see Jehovah right the wrongs of the world
Yep.
at Armageddon. I mean, the way he's going to do it is a brutal, horrible, horrible way through the slaughter of men, women, and children around the world. But underneath that, they think that it's, at least it's going to create, I guess the ends justify the means. It's going to create a world without the horrible things that are present in the world.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I kind of get that on a level, that.
Well, and now that you're talking, it's reminding me, like, I got in trouble a couple times for things that I didn't do, and it really bothered me, because I'm like, I didn't do the thing. Why am I getting in trouble? And I think that's kind of where that came from, because I was just like, what? Like, there was no reason for me to get in trouble. And I remember, like, one time I was standing up for my mom because this lady was like, she was being so mean to my mom for no reason. And my mom would leave the Kingdom Hall crying. And I did not like that. I did not like people making my mom cry. My mom was like a very kind, sweet person. She still is. And so I wrote this lady a note, and I was just like, I don't like what you do. I was like 5, 6. My handwriting was atrocious. But I wrote it, and I remember being in the back room, and my friend was like, she was helping me write it, because we were like, we're going to tell her not to be mean to my mom. And so I wrote her this note, and she was like, write it in green. And I was like, green? She was like, green means mad. So from then on, green became my mad color. But I wrote this whole note to this sister in green, and it was just like, I don't like what you're doing to my mom. But she couldn't read it. So then I got called in my first elders meeting was when I was like 6. I had to go in the back room, and they were like, you can't write this. You said I don't like you. And I'm like, I didn't say I don't like you in the note. I said I don't like what you're doing to my mom. But they were reading it wrong. And then I got in trouble for that. And I'm like, to this day, I didn't do anything wrong. And I'm like, I stood up for my mom, and it changed after that. She stopped messing with my mom. And I felt good about that. It's just, I've always had that feeling like people shouldn't be in trouble for things that they didn't do. People shouldn't be in trouble for most things, to be honest. But the people who do things and then get away with it are just awful. So that's kind of the way I grew up, was just like, people need to be held accountable for their actions appropriately, and then not held accountable for things they didn't do. So that's ridiculous.
Well, I can tell you, it's interesting to hear you say that, just because so many people, I think most ex-JWs have that story where somewhere along the line, oftentimes, to be frank, it's mom and dad who are accusing kids of things that they totally didn't do, because witness parents are kind of, they're on the hook for your salvation, so to speak. And they, out of that pressure to some degree, they always think you're up to something. They're always trying to catch you in something, some sort of sin. And because they just got to keep you on the straight and narrow, so to speak. And I think we all have stories of being blamed for things that simply never happened.
Yeah.
whether it's with our parents or it's in the congregation with the elders. There's just always people watching you. They're always seeking to catch you in something wrong, not something good.
Right.
And they're always seeking to bring that to the forefront. And they don't, once they get a narrative in their mind as to what happened, you're not being listened to. It's
No.
over.
No, and it's a lot of it has to do with perception too. Like they
Yeah.
decide that it's wrong because of their perception, not
Yeah.
because it's wrong, but because of how it looks. But I mean, everything is about how it looks.
Yeah. It's appearance over substance. So um well, that's interesting. So let's talk. So touched a little bit on school. What was your home life like growing up? Do you have any other siblings? What was kind of the temperature of the room? Did you have fun as a family? What was it like?
Yeah, I have good memories of my childhood. I didn't grow up with siblings, so it was just me. But my parents were very good about, like I said, I've got a lot of kids in the hall. So anytime we went anywhere, they had me bring a friend, which was great. So I had a best friend for like most of my life. And she lived like 2 streets down from me. So we were very close to the same school. We could walk to each other's house. So I did have good memories. We did a lot of like camping and like fishing and went to baseball games, and my grandpa and dad were big into fishing and baseball, so I went with them a lot. We did a lot of barbecues in the back, a lot of congregation activities, not as much as we got older, or as I got older, because my dad became an elder, and it's funny, you stop getting invited to things, and your dad becomes an elder. At least I did. So that was fun.
I get that. So you stopped getting invited to things by other young people, or
Yeah, I remember they did a whole like young people group trip at this like camp in Seattle, and I was not invited. I was the only kid not invited to the congregation, like the only kid. And they invited the teenagers to the little kids. It was like a really big deal. And then afterwards I found out about it, and they were like, "Oh, we invited you." And I'm like, "No, you didn't." I would remember that because I would have wanted to go. Yeah.
were the kids of other elders invited to that?
Um, None of the other kids had elder parents.
Ah, okay. Because I
Yeah.
mean, I think you're kind of seen as a snitch, right?
They thought, and honestly, like I was not going to be the snitch. I would have taken that to my grave. Everything. I was a vault. I'm like, I tried to tell you guys, I wouldn't have said anything, but y'all are the snitches, not me.
So you had this, well, maybe, excuse me, maybe your reputation for being outspoken preceded you, and maybe they thought, oh, she talks a lot, and or you know is outspoken, especially regarding justice or accountability. Maybe we're afraid she's going to get us in trouble.
Probably, but for me, it was like my internal accountability. Like I remember I was at a sleepover and they played a movie that I was not allowed to watch. And I already knew I was not allowed to watch it. So I removed myself and just like sat by
Yeah.
myself in the other room. And that was awful. And I really shouldn't have done that. That was so dumb. It was The Mask, but from with the one with Jim Carrey. Like I wasn't allowed to watch that because I was 12 and it was PG-13, and I was not allowed to watch movies until I was PG-13 movies until I was actually 13. But I removed myself, and I'm like, I don't care if y'all watch that. Like it's just for me. So it was never about like holding others, like telling on other people. And I think you're right, though. I think people had that perception of me as like she's gonna snitch, but I'm like, nope, not me. Y'all do. You guys take care of your own stuff. I was never that person that wanted to find fault in others. I hate finding fault in others. Even to this day, it sucks. It's like
Sure.
it didn't feel good to do that.
No, I mean you had been found fault with by elders at the tender age of 6 years old because you wrote some crayon letter. I don't know what you were really using to write, but
It was like a little notebook, like a Lisa Frank notebook. Like it was like a document or something. I'm like, okay.
it's serious business, Tara.
6-year-olds really upset people apparently. Like, okay.
So it's so at home. Did you all, just as a family, were you all super like into the witness activities? Were you all doing a lot of personal study? Were you preparing for meetings and things like that? Were you super into the activities of the congregation, even at home in your own house?
Yes and no. So about some things, yes, we were very good about like studying. We always had to have our watchtower studied. Um, And it would like, I was a very fast reader. Like I said, I love to read. So I was a really fast reader. So I got through it really quickly. And then I would, do my studying, but then my parents were taking forever. So I was just like, I just sit there and pretend to study multiple times. Because my dad, he was like highlighted the whole watchtower with different colors. And my mom took her little note. So we did our own like watchtower study preparation. We were not good about regular family study. um, Me and my mom, we didn't really want to do it. My dad tried, he did try, but he also was working, 14-hour days. Um, and on top of him being an elder at, when I think he was like, I was like 9 when he became an elder. So he had a lot of busyness in life. So we weren't the best at family study. But we did definitely like prayers before every meal. And it was like, we were the family that was always at the dinner table together. And like, it was very traditional. Like my dad went to work, my mom stayed at home kind of thing. It definitely was in our life. Daily text every morning or at night. Forget about the daily text. Wow.
Oh, the daily text. Yes.
Yeah, and we talked about it a lot. Like we practiced for service at the house. Like most of when I was little, we did like I would knock on the doors and like they would open the bedroom doors, and that's how we would practice presentations. A lot of service prep. We did. My mom was a regular pioneer for most of my life, so I went out in service with her a lot. She did a lot of prep for that. We had the book study at our house
Oh,
on
wow.
Thursday night, and service meeting on Saturday. So it was always something going on. I loved having the book study at our house because I didn't have to wear like nice shoes. And it was really exciting because I got to be like in my pajamas immediately. Um, I was not a fan of getting dressed up. That was not my thing. But we did have, a lot of witness stuff happening in life.
Was there a lot of pressure to keep the house perfect at all times with the all the people, the witnesses coming over all the time for the book study and the service meeting and such? Do you have to be very
Um,
fastidious about those things?
yeah, my dad has OCD.
Ah,
So that was never really an issue. And my mom didn't work. So she works in the home and she kept it really tidy. I mean, she would have had to, or else she would have faced the wrath of the sisters. Um, but it was not a hard house to keep clean, which was great. We just had like one big living room, which is why it's why we did all the things there because we had a big living room. So it was just like vacuuming, really. We didn't keep it too, but yes, there was definitely that pressure to make sure it was good. We also did sing-alongs at our house because we had a piano, and so people would come from all congregations with their instruments and their songbooks, and we would just sing kingdom songs like one Friday a month. We did that for a lot of years, but it was at our house. I don't know how that even started or why it stopped.
did you like that? Do you like to sing? Was that something that you found fun and some, even though
I
it's kingdom song?
loved it because I loved music.
Yeah.
Was I wanted to be in the choir. I was in choir for 2 years until it started to be after school. I actually sang in the all city choir when I was in 5th grade with my school, but then the actual performance was on a day that my dad had a talk at another congregation. So he was late to give his talk because he was seeing me perform. And so that was the last time I performed on stage.
Wow.
That time.
Uh, that's that's a unique thing to have at your house. The sing-alongs and the the music and
I've
that you
never got
got to
anybody
sing
else
at
to do
school and
that.
stuff. I mean, that's a unique experience, I think.
I liked it though because I did have friends from other congregations that would come over and everybody brought like something to snack on and I could sing for a few songs and then go in my room and listen to the music. I love listening to any type of music. Like I'm a very big fan of music. So that's something I fell in love with at an early age.
So, is that did you meet new people through that? Because you said like people were coming from other congregations and such. So did that help, I guess, cement your interest in this thing just because like now you're meeting more people, it expands your horizons, your network is larger, you're I guess more connected to the organization as you're getting involved with more individuals through
Yeah,
these sing-alongs.
Definitely. And the fact that my dad did also give talks out, I was at a lot of different places. So I felt
Oh
like
yeah.
I felt the brotherhood, right? Like they're like, you can go anywhere and have friends. And that was true for me. Well, what I knew was friendship at the time anyway. Turns out that's, the Jehovah's Witness version of friendship that you
Sure.
get. But yeah, it definitely did. And I was able to have friends from other congregations that were my age, which was nice. Because what had happened is our area, it's a very small world, in the Jehovah's Witness life. You always know somebody. But there was one congregation, and in like the 60s, when they were doing a lot of door to door, it expanded and turned into 4 congregations. So everybody kind of still knew each other that had grown up together. So like my grandma's best friends lived in a different congregation, but then their grandkid would all come together. So we did have a pretty good network of people, which was nice.
Yeah, like
That
almost like a
also,
big family.
yeah, but that also is like, I think a lot of them are still in. Majority of them are still in. And I think that is kind of why, because everything is there. You have friends, you have community, you have family. There's one congregation that was like basically 4 big families. That was it.
Oh, there's so many big families in the
Yeah.
organization, right? That can kind of dominate the landscape of 1 or 2 congregations or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Um, but it really does sound like would you say we'll get to your experience well, let's just talk about your experience at the Kingdom Hall a little bit, but it sounds like there was a lot of inclusion there, or did you at least, that doesn't mean that everybody felt included, but did you feel included as far as with the brotherhood around you?
For the most part, I felt like if I did more activities, that I would be more included. Like if I showed up at these places, if I was in like did the sing-alongs, if I was out in service, like I felt, because I really wanted connection. I didn't, like I said, didn't grow up with siblings. I wanted siblings, and I wanted connection with people that was beyond just at the meetings. Like I, because I didn't have that. And then in school and going out in service, like a lot of my contacts during the week were, people who are older than me, adults. Um, so it was nice to have these other opportunities to just like, hey, this is life. But I really did feel like if I participated more in the activities, that I would have more connection and that I would feel closer to people.
Well, I mean, I think that that's true,
Yeah.
right? The more involved you are, I mean, I think that's true outside of the organization too. Just
Yeah.
the more involved you are in anything, the more you're going to meet people. You'll be out there. Momentum breeds momentum. So you you
Yeah.
you tend to form more relationships.
Well, and at the time, I really thought that these were going to be my lifetime, like
Of
people I was
course.
going to be in my life for eternity, right? Into the paradise and beyond. So I was like really into them, like all of, like, I was into everybody. I was just wanted to be around people and have good relationships with people. That wasn't always easy for me, but I wanted them to be my friends forever.
Of course, of course, and you're being taught that that's what's going to happen, right? The Jehovah's Witnesses are the most loving people on earth, according to Jehovah's Witnesses, and they have the truth, they have true friendships, they have the best families and things
Yeah.
like that.
Oh yeah, I was fully bought into that family happiness book. Like I really truly believed that if I did the things that it said in the family happiness book, I was going to be golden.
Well, of course, of course. Well, and that's what you're being told.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and even I was thinking about it too. Like even as I slept, I was listening to the dramas.
oh
They would
wow.
record those. Like we'd order them so I could listen to them at night because I was always had to listen to something before bed. And it was like some of them are really violent. Like I was listening to this when I was a child. Like children are getting killed. Like, but
Yeah,
I love the
I
dramas.
can't claim. Do you remember one in particular? Does one stand out to you that
My
was
favorite.
particularly violent or whatever?
I mean, the 10 plagues is
Mm.
always a bad one because you have them killing the firstborn, and you can. But the one that got me was Achan's family. Again, thing about justice. They did the thing where Achan sinned. I forget now, and I'm really happy I forget these things. But he sinned, and so his family got murdered. And I'm like, that. But they didn't do anything. So I listened to that one, and then that was a good
Jehovah's
one.
Justice, Tara.
I know. And I was like, but wait. And then Josiah, I liked him too because he was a kid when he was king. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I could do that.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I think they really liked to focus on that story,
Yeah.
a kid being king,
Yeah.
essentially.
That was probably my favorite one. I listened to that probably once a week.
Yeah. I honestly don't remember them at all. We never had any of that stuff, but my wife, Jenny, her family, I think they had all the tapes and they'd listen to them in the car, CDs over time, whatever. But I don't remember any of them, and I'm very happy not to. It sounds like they were.
I was the only one of my friends that had this.
Okay.
So crazy.
So so in the Kingdom Hall, what was life like? Were you all at all the meetings? Were you, Tara? Were you participating? Did you like to give talks or comments or go out in service? Like, were you happy to be involved? I mean, because it sounds like again you were realizing that performance and
Yep.
activity would perhaps win friends for you and relationships and such.
Yeah, I really enjoyed meetings. Not for the content, but I was a very avid participator. I always had comments prepared. Once I was a little old, like I was like 12 or 13, I joined the impromptu talk list, so I could give talks on short notice. Loved doing that. I loved the short notice talks. I had one particular sister that we always did it together, and it was great every time. I liked doing that stuff a lot. Yeah. Definitely big commenter. Yeah.
Well, outspoken or not afraid to speak up, I guess, if that's the case. If you want to tell your story on the podcast, buy merch, or get more information, go to shunnedpodcast.com. So you got to give talks and such. Did you enjoy going out into the ministry and meeting people or talking at strangers' doors?
That was not my favorite.
Okay.
Because you sometimes find somebody you go to school with, and it's just like the worst day of your life, right? The worst. And that happened 2 doors in one day, and I was like, this is the worst day ever. So I didn't really love ministry. I like to be with people, but I didn't like to go knock on people's doors. I did it because that's what you're supposed to do, but I was always like, please, Jehovah, let them not open the door, let them not be home. Please let them be not at home. Like, the worst.
So you were outspoken some at school, but when you came across a schoolmate in the ministry, formally, that felt really awful.
Well, and my outspokenness, I will say too, like diminished as I got older.
Oh, that's fair.
So when I was like an older teenager, I really started disliking the ministry, and I really started liking. I didn't like doing that.
Yeah, it gets cringier.
It's worse the more you understand it.
That's very true. It's worse the more you understand it. I think that goes for a lot of things regarding all of this.
Well, I would see how irritated my parents would get when like the Mormons came to our door. I'm like, or like, but we do that.
How dare you do what we do?
Like when somebody would like, because they they used to sell encyclopedias door to door back in the day. They would get so irritated. I'm just like, but we do that like Saturday mornings. The people are asleep.
Well, they were asleep.
Yeah. Or on holidays. My dad was a holiday service goer. I was not. I hated going out on the holidays.
Oh, so you didn't go on the holidays? Like, were you allowed to say no or to decline?
My mom didn't go out on holidays either.
Oh, so you and your mom would stay home.
Yeah. Usually, like, I think I went out one time on Thanksgiving and we got yelled at, and I was like, I don't want to do that again.
I've been out on many holidays, and I will say that actually people tended to be pretty nice. I think because they were already in a jovial spirit, and it was kind of just like, yeah, I'll be nice to you. Take this thing, please get off my porch so I can go back to my family.
Yeah. I just
Oh no, it was cringy and horrible, and I didn't want to be there. But and especially on Christmas, right, with a magazine telling them why their holiday was trash.
Yeah,
it was not a good feeling.
It's not a good look. I think the worst though was like Halloween. We had one sister that would give out tracts. We had parties at our house on Halloween nights, and it wasn't Halloween parties. It was like Bible study parties. Super fun.
Oh, wow.
And she would hand out tracts to trick-or-treaters, and I'm like, please don't do that. But so then after a couple years after that, I was like, we cannot be handing out tracts to people. It's super embarrassing. Can we just go to the movies?
Yeah,
And
how
so
many times did your house get egged?
none, none. I'm
Wow.
so shocked. So shocked.
Maybe they were afraid of God or something, so they wouldn't do that because man, that behavior could get you some
That's what
bad.
I said. I said, when the kids get a little older in the neighborhood, they're going to be upset. So we
Oh,
should
yeah.
start doing something different. So then I convinced my parents to like, let's go to so now I go to the movies, like, or I used to still do that even on holidays. Like the holidays just became like a movie going time for me.
Oh yeah, Christmas was great for movies. There were usually new movies out and the
Yep.
theaters were open. Yeah.
Yep. And we would go to every Christmas we went to the mountains. Big group of people went to the mountains, big group of witnesses to go inner tubing and then the movies. That was my Christmas.
Well, so I have to say, you're painting a picture here where it sounds like for you, being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, growing up in it, you felt attached to things. You felt relatively happy doing the things that you had to do. It doesn't feel like you were struggling against it a lot. You kind of enjoyed a lot of the activities, the
Yep.
people. You had a lot of people around you in different ways.
Yep.
Your family wasn't at odds and, super, well, super abusive. There's
Yeah.
always mental
Yeah.
and emotional things with the,
Yeah. I mean, it definitely wasn't like perfect.
yeah.
My parents argued a lot, and like there was extra like other family members that were like, you were either witness family or you weren't. And
Mm.
so the ones that weren't, they were always like kind of talked about and not very looked well upon. Um, but yeah, I mean, I was fully bought into it. I really believed in what I was living when I was growing up. Because that was the only thing, my only view. Like it was the only thing I had to go on.
So then how did things progress as you went into your teenage years? I don't know when you got baptized or whatever. We can bring that
Yeah, I
in.
got baptized when I was 11.
11. Okay, so preteen.
Yep, I was going into sixth grade, and I was like, "We're gonna go into middle school strong." So we got baptized at 11, and 11 and 12, like sixth and seventh grade were like kind of a breeze. And then eighth grade happened, and it kind of all went to crap. Eighth grade, new family moved into the congregation, and they were from the East Coast, and East Coast and West Coast have very different vibes, just like in general. But she was like, I really liked her because she was from Boston. She like was very outspoken. She wasn't going to hold back because Washington is very passive aggressive. We're very passive aggressive here. And I never identified with that. Like like outspoken. I didn't have like, I wanted that connection, but I wasn't always welcome because of I was. So this girl moving in was like really great for me. I had finally had somebody in my grade that was like a witness, so I could like really connect with her. And one day she came to me, we were in English class, and she was like, "Hey, this person told me, another girl in our congregation, she told me that your dad isn't your biological dad. Is that true?" And I'm like, "What? Who says that?" And so I, of course, got angry, and I'm like, "That's wild. Like, how could you ever say that?" Like, we started fighting in class. I got kicked out of class, and I was like a really good student. This was like a big deal for me. And I was like upset and crying. And I had to go to the nurse, and they basically sent me home for the day. And so my mom's picking me up, and she was like, "What happened?" I was like, "I hate this person. Like, I never want to see her again." I blamed this girl for telling me this terrible thing, because who just asks somebody if their dad isn't their biological dad? Like, I was so offended. So I I wouldn't tell my mom what she had said until we got home. And I finally told her, and the look on my mom's face, I will never forget it. It was just like her face fell, and she turned white as a ghost, and I knew at that moment that that was true, and I was just like, I went in my room, shut the door, and I didn't come out for hours. I was just crying and super upset. Obviously, that's a really big thing to find out when you're 13. In that way too. Uh, and so my dad got home, and I could hear my mom on the phone with my grandma and my great grandma. And my great grandma was like, "Well, you should have told her when she asked you," because I did ask about my family, like parentage, because I was in my parents' wedding photos, and you know, I was like, "Why am I in your wedding photos? I know what we learn at the meetings." you know, that was the questions I asked. And they never had a good answer for me. My dad said people make mistakes, and then he walked away. When I was like 7, I was like, why am I in these pictures?
Because people make mistakes. Oh, that's a great answer.
Yeah, and then he walked away from me like in a panic. Now I'm like laughing because it's like, okay.
Oh,
But I thought that it was like, I thought it was their mistake. Like, I thought that they had like had me before they got married, and then that was how it went. But no, it was, he was talking about my mom. I guess, I guess. But yeah, I also thought that I looked a lot more like my dad who raised me. Because his whole family has like is like tall with like long blonde hair, and I have long blonde hair. My mom's family, all the women have dark curly hair. So I always thought, like, I remember asking him, like, is mom my real mom? Because we don't look anything alike. And he just kind of laughed, and he was like, that's her real mom. Those are the two times I remember, like, hey, those would have been great opportunities. And even that night, when I found out this information, I said, when I asked you these things years ago, that would have been a great opportunity for you to tell me. Were you ever planning on telling me? So then when my dad got home, they talked, because he left work early that day to come home and talk to me. And they sat me on the couch, and they were like, yep, what questions do you have? And I'm like, all of them. I have all of the questions. Um,
listen, what questions do you have instead of let us explain this to you?
yeah, pretty much.
Really put the
They just
onus
felt
on
like
you.
basically it was very much like the only thing that they really told me was, yes, that's true. But like he adopted you when you were 8. They told me the process of what had happened. Um, but then I had to ask the questions of like, well, who is this person that is my biological father? Or does he have more children? Like, do I have siblings? Like those were my questions. I remember in my head being very focused on not treating my dad any differently, because he had raised me, and I thought he was a very good dad. And he was a very good dad for you know, he was a very good dad. So I really wanted to make sure that he didn't feel like I didn't see him as dad. But I was really angry at my mom. Like, so I specifically took things out on my mom that was like, I mean, I don't know what I would have done if I was 18 in that situation either. So, you know, now I feel a lot differently about this. But when 13-year-old Tara was very angry, and hurt, and I
And
felt,
rightfully so.
and then I was like, well, how did they all know that this was happening? And so then she was like, well, I know who it was. And so my mom then called. It was like three times removed. It was her, one of those people in the congregation that they grew up with, told their daughter. Their daughter told this other girl. This other girl told the new girl, and the new girl told me. And they were blaming the first person. And I was like, it's not her fault that you guys lied to me. I remember saying that to them. But like, you know,
Wow.
yeah, I was really, really,
Insightful, really. I mean, as a kid to realize that, you can't go blaming all these other people. You
yeah.
are where the origination of the lie.
Well, I felt so stupid. I felt so stupid. I was like, so everybody knows this, because this person who has been in our congregation 2 months now knows this, and I don't know this. And I grew up with all of like, I was so bothered by this, like, and I still am. Like, everybody knew except for me, and I felt like the Truman Show. A lot of Jim Carrey references in this. I don't know why, but I felt like I was in the Truman Show, like where he finds out at the end. And every time I watch that movie, still, I'm just like bawling at the end, because I'm like, how devastating to find out their entire life is a lie. And it's not necessarily that I would have chosen to do things differently. Um, I don't know if I would have, but the fact that I didn't have the opportunity was really messed up. Um, yeah. So, because also, I didn't know this, but when you get adopted, they change your birth certificate, which I think is super messed up. So, my dad, who raised me, is listed as the birth father on my birth certificate,
Oh,
which
wow.
is wild. So, I would have never, like, they never would have had to tell me. So, I was always going to either find out, like, and I was like, were you just, they said they were going to tell me when I turned 18. I don't know that I believe that. But, I think they would have waited as long as possible.
I mean, why tell you when you're 18? You're asking about this,
Yep.
uh, and seem to be able to articulate yourself well. Why does
Yeah.
18 create anything magical where suddenly now you're ready because you're
Yeah.
18? That
Yeah.
doesn't. Um,
Yeah.
so did they tell you who your biological father was? Were they forthcoming with information, I guess, if you asked for it?
If I asked for it, yes, but it was very uncomfortable. I could tell that it was uncomfortable for both of them. So I relied a lot on my grandma, my mom's mom. She was a lot more forthcoming with information, and would tell me kind of like what he looked like because I didn't know anything. I knew his name, and I only had a first name from my parents, and I'm like, well, that's giving me nothing. And I wanted to know what he looked like, and my mom described him as having dark hair, and I was like, that's confusing. And she was like, but his sisters were all tall and blonde, and I was like, okay. So that's because I was very confused as to why I look the way I do, when none of my family looks like that I knew of. And really, I'm just kind of my head was spinning. I mean, I was everything that I knew was had changed, and I didn't know who I was anymore. I had a last name and a first name, but social media didn't exist at that time. It was what 1997, 98. So it was not like we had MySpace a little bit, but not really. It was just starting around that time. So I had nothing to go on. She had nothing to go on. My mom didn't even know what had gone on because the adoption had finished and she hadn't heard from him since then. So at that time I knew nothing other than my entire life was different and there's nothing I could do about it. And I started questioning everything, because
Yeah, I was gonna say that's really gotta make you start wondering
yep,
what else is not
yep.
what it seems to be.
But I had already gotten baptized. And at that point, that is probably when I started to regret getting baptized, even when I was 13, because I'm like, I didn't have all the information. What was I thinking? But I already done that. And you may not like when you get baptized at 11. I mean, I don't think you even understand at any age when you get baptized what the stakes are, right? I knew that if I left, I was gonna be shunned. Like I knew that. Like that in your head, like because you read it, and you shun people. Like you shun people when you're involved too. Um, but I didn't really understand. I didn't understand the full picture. I wasn't able to at 11. I had no business getting baptized
Of
at
course
11.
not.
Um,
No, you can't make those decisions at 11.
no,
You can't get married at 11. You can't make any
nope,
commitments or legal binding decisions, but
nope,
you can forever dedicate yourself to a
forever.
religious organization, a religious
Yep.
corporation.
And who cares what everybody else does to you, right? Or does in spite. It doesn't matter because you're
No.
stuck. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna make the best of it because this is a decision I made. And I was very like, I made this choice. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do it. So
Kind
I
of like
said,
accountability. You're kind of holding yourself, right? Like,
yep,
well,
yep,
I have to be accountable to this decision that I made,
yep.
even if it's not necessarily the wisest.
Yeah. And I was still very bought into the religion. So it wasn't like I was questioning that, but I was questioning everybody around me. And I mean, I guess I was kind of questioning religion a little bit, but I was not questioning that I had to do what I had to do
You
because I
weren't
was like,
questioning the doctrine, but maybe the people.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I didn't trust anybody after that. I was like,
Yeah.
everybody
How
was
could
lying to
you?
me. Everybody was lying to me. And the person that told this new girl was the person that I grew up with two doors down or two houses down. So this was like my closest friend that just like never told me that this was a thing and went around me. And it was so awful. I'm like, y'all are the worst. Like, you guys are not good friends. You guys are all liars, and I'm sick of everybody. And that was a really hard year. But I did that summer decide to just kind of throw myself into it because I didn't really feel like I had a choice. I was stuck at that point. Like, well, we're gonna make the most of it. And I read the family happiness book again, and the young people asked book again, and was just like, all right, how can we make this like the best life ever?
So did you kind of almost like double down like maybe if I do more of this or really throw myself into it, I can overcome my feelings and make myself feel a certain way?
Yeah. Yeah. I was very much like if because the book said if you do this and you do this and you do this and you go to meetings, study, service, good association, you will be happy. And I was like, great, sign me up. And I did all of that. And so I did that, like that was kind of my entire attitude as I became an adult was just like, I'm gonna do the things, it's tried and true. That's what everybody tells me. everybody's so happy it's Kingdom Hall all the time. And then realizing later that was not the case was very shocking too.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So then, how did your life proceed and progress as a teenager? Now, I guess with a more full knowledge of certain things in your life, at least.
Yes. Yeah. So like I said, I was a really good student. I really wanted to go to college. My teachers wanted me to go to college. That was not going to be my pathway. I was going to be a pioneer because that's what I was supposed to do. I still applied for college and got in on a scholarship, and it was a Jesuit college, so there's no way I was going to go. But I wanted to see if I could do it, and I did it. I took the SATs without my family knowing, just to see if I could do it, and I did it. And then after high school, I turned 18, which was the magic number, right? You're an adult, so you can date and you can do all this stuff that you weren't able to do. And I switched congregations pretty much immediately after I turned 18, by myself.
Really?
I did.
So did you have, I don't know, like, did you have jobs when you were 16? Did you save up for a car? Did you do the things to set yourself up where you would have that degree of independence?
Yeah, I was very excited to drive. So I got my permit when I was 15. I started working at the school, and then I worked at Target. That was my first job. And like I didn't have to save for a car. That was my grandfather's gift to me. He's still in the world, so he gave us birthday gifts and wrapped them in different wrapping. But he got me a little car at an auction for like $300. And that was my first car, and like I said, I loved music still. So my first job was making my car great. I got speakers for it. I got the CD deck. I was always buying CDs, especially because I worked at Target. I got a discount, so I was always buying CDs. I bought a lot of CDs with warning labels on them, but I wasn't allowed to have those, obviously. So I had to buy 2 copies. I spent a lot of money. Like the musicians of the 90s and early 2000s should be thanking me, because I had to buy 2 of everything. One with the warning label and then the edited version, and I just switched the CDs.
So you bought the clean version of the Eminem CD or whatever.
Yep. And I would put little stickers over the warning labels so my parents can find out. But yeah, like Eminem was my first, I was all about all that stuff. So I was really able to be myself. I had seat warmers. I had like fuzzy dice. It was, it was early 2000s. It was living life.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I was able to get some independence from that, and I was able to drive to the store. And my mom really liked that too, because then she didn't have to go places. My parents really were happy that I was independent, I think, because they knew that I needed that. Like I had to have that, or I was not going to be okay.
But you used that as soon as you turned 18 to switch congregations. I mean, that's an interesting.
They switched first. So they switched. I turned 18, and then that summer, because my birthday's in March, so that summer I switched congregations. But right after I turned 18, before I was even done with high school, my parents switched to the Vietnamese group. So they switched entire language, and the Vietnamese group had a different congregation. They wanted me to go with them. I had no interest in doing that. So I stayed in my home congregation for a few months, and then summertime came, and I was just like, something happened that summer that was like really ridiculous. I went on a graduation trip to Mexico with some other girls that were in other congregations that were graduating the same year. Our parents kind of surprised us and took us to Mexico. And I had gone to senior prom that year secretly. I had snuck out. The only time I didn't really do a lot of bad stuff when I was a teenager, but I did sneak out and go to prom with this guy that was like a friend of a friend, a worldly guy, but he was like associated with the witnesses. I snuck out. I told my cousin, and that was a mistake. And then they ratted me out while I was on vacation. So I came back to an elders meeting, and I was so mad because I'm like, there was a group of 4 of us, and 2 of the girls like ratted me out, and then they said I was like drinking on the beach. I got in a lot of trouble. I mean, a lot of trouble. My punishment was they were rebuilding the assembly hall at the time. So my punishment, I was not mad about this, was not being allowed to work on the Kingdom Hall or on the assembly.
Oh no.
And I was like, because it was this huge privilege, and I was like, I didn't want to do that anyway. That's me getting up at 7 o'clock on the weekend and going.
Yeah.
No, I don't want. Okay.
It's like when they tell you you can't comment at the meetings or you can't go out in field service. No, please don't take the drudgery away from
Yeah.
me.
I'm like, you're literally taking away work off my plate. Now I'm not allowed
Yeah.
to do. And it was like a little while, it like irritated. Like I was happy about that, but then when it got finished, it was supposed to be like a see what you missed out on being a part of, like building Jehovah's house, and I'm like, I don't care. Like I didn't want to do the work. I'm not like I didn't want to be handy.
I didn't want to be handy. So did you because you had snuck out and gone to prom, did that pretty much, because you weren't truthful with that, then was anything you were accused of in Mexico or whatever, that was automatically, you're going to get in trouble for that, whether you did it or not, because no one's going to listen to you now because they don't believe you because you snuck out and went to prom?
Well, they nothing that I did in Mexico was the reason why I was in the back room. I was all right in Mexico. My mom was there, so I was like, I'm not going to do that terrible.
Oh, okay.
They just ratted me out while I was there. They didn't even talk to me about it. And I was so offended because the scripture says you're supposed to talk to your brother if you have a fault with them first. And they
Yes.
didn't do that. Except for my one friend, she did. And honestly, I felt the worst. Like I felt really bad for that one friend because the guy I went to prom with, he and I were just friends, but she really liked him. So that was not good friend move on me on my part. But I'm 18. It is what it is. Nothing happened. Like I said, we were just friends. And yeah, my other two friends ratted me out. And one of them was my cousin. It was really upsetting.
Yeah. Isn't it funny? You weren't being invited to things because people might have been afraid that you would rat them
Mhm.
out, but they're the ones ratting you out.
Yep. Yep.
Wow.
I'm like, all right, don't trust you guys either.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, you're just, that's being reinforced, right? Who can you trust around here? People won't tell you things you maybe should know, but they'll
Yeah.
tell people things they don't really have a right to know.
Yeah. And honestly, I think like I started to lie a lot more around that time.
Sure.
Because
Forces people
I
to.
learned that, like the best liars are Jehovah's Witnesses, in my opinion, because we have to.
Absolutely. Jehovah's Witnesses are liars through and through.
It's
They
so
have
messed
to.
up because it's like we call it the truth, but it's like that's not no, that's a lie in of itself.
Yeah, they're all lying.
Yeah.
It's how you get by.
Yep.
It's how you can watch that movie that you're not supposed to watch, or listen to that song know you're not supposed to listen to, or
Yep.
ignore that feeling in the back of your head that something is wrong here,
Yep.
or whatever. You just lie to yourself and try to make it okay to keep going down that path.
Yep. Yep. And that was kind of like how after 18, I went when I switched to the new congregation, that was like a huge change for me because then instead of being the oldest of the group, having just graduated high school, I was the youngest of the young adults. So I was like 18, but like everybody was like 20, 21. And I was really grateful for that because they were kind of the party hall. And I started going into the witness parties, which was awesome. I had a really great time going to the parties. They were way more wild than I ever expected them to be because I was very sheltered in my little elder's daughter life. Um,
Can I ask what
and
that means? Because Jehovah's Witnesses get wild.
man, I went to one party and I left because I got a little frightened because there was like 400 people at this party. There was a car on fire, and people still talked about it like 10 years after. Somebody had lit a car on fire in the parking lot. People were like having sex in the whole house. There was like alcohol everywhere. It was like you could not move in the house. It was crazy. And I was like, we gotta go. Like, this is not okay. Um, but I remember like I would see people who were like married couples that were like making out with other people, and it was very confusing to me. I was like, this is like Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, look at
uh,
that.
JW's gone wild is a thing, and
Seriously.
people don't realize.
No clue over here.
And I'm not shaming them for the behaviors. I mean,
No.
whatever you do as consenting people is on you. You're adults. It's not my business as long as you're
Yep.
not hurting anybody.
Yep.
But Jehovah's Witnesses portray this squeaky clean image of they would never do such and such, but that's just not true at all. Jehovah's Witnesses are involved in anything and everything that you could think of that
Yep.
would happen anywhere else. They
Yep.
just lie to everybody and pretend that they don't do that.
Yeah,
And they act holier than thou tomorrow at the meeting.
was so like mind blown, right? That was not how I was raised. I was so shook to my core about some of those things, that it wasn't like in a bad way. It was just like, oh my gosh, people, you can actually like be okay and do that stuff. Shocking, right? But it was really great for my social like happiness.
Sure.
I met some great people. I met my ex-husband there at one of the parties. And I got married fairly young. I was like, I just turned 20, I think, when I got married.
Mhm.
And it
How
was
old
one
was
of
he?
the he was 25,
Okay.
24, he's like 4 or 5 years older than me. But we dated for a year. We were engaged for 6 months. Like the witness timeline, that's what they like. He was from a different congregation out in like a small town, and I was from a city. And so it was very different vibes. That marriage did not go well. And I quickly like realized I was not going to make it. Like that was not going to last. But actually, something. No, see, yeah. So I knew that was kind of not going to work. But I'd made the decision to get married, and here we are.
My original podcast, This JW Life, is my story, which started all of this. You can listen to it today on podcast apps and find more at thisjwlife.com. Or if you're interested, you can read my book, Becoming Jehovah, online for free at becomingjehovah.com.
And there's not a whole
Yeah,
lot.
another commitment that you now have to live up to.
Yep. And I mean, when you're married, you don't have any options. Like you're very stuck if you're unhappy.
Right.
And
Did you move out to where he was from, or did he move to where you
he
were?
moved to where I was,
Okay.
which was great. I was really happy about that. But then my grandma died, my great grandma died, and she was just like she was and is my favorite person in my family. She was like 4 feet tall. She was she was born in England. She was just the sweetest lady in the world. She passed away, and then my husband got hurt at work. And so he was out of work for like 6 months. He hurt his back, and he started playing this video game, and he got obsessed with it. But because he was out of work, we ended up moving in with his family, out in the country. My mother-in-law she hated me, and she made it very clear. She was very abusive verbally, and it was just really bad. We lived there for 4 months. He had gone back to work at that point and orchestrated it so that I would quit my job. Mostly because he kind of made me quit my job. When we moved out to the country, my job was like 45 minutes. But he would take my car in the morning to work, so I couldn't get to work, and then not answer his phone all day. So I was at home by myself for about 4 months, all day long, because everybody in the family went to work, and they took my car, didn't leave the keys for the other car.
Wow, you really got isolated out
I
there.
did, and I started drinking a lot because they had a pool and I had nothing to do. I also didn't have a car, so I would walk down to it was almost every day. I would walk to Subway and get like a sandwich, and then walk to Safeway, which is right next door, and get some alcohol, and walk back, and then spend the day getting drunk and playing video games because I didn't have anything else to do. And my
Oh,
friends lived
wow.
in Seattle.
You started doing what he was doing, so to
Yeah.
speak,
Yep.
because with
Yep.
nothing else to do out there.
Yep. And he was back to work and everything. Like I was just like, well, this is my life now. I'm to numb it, and so I can be happy, basically. So
Wow.
I finally had enough of that. She had thrown like a cup of coffee at me, and the mother-in-law, she was certifiable. And I was like, I'm like, I'm moving. You come with me. For not, I'm moving back home to my family's, because I can't take this anymore. And so I moved back to my family's. He came with me. He got hurt at work again. So we were living then at my parents, and he was back to playing video games 24/7 at this point, to the point where it was like taking over his life. And I was not happy. So he got a promotion at work, moved us down kind of towards Oregon. So we moved hundreds of miles away at this point. Again, didn't have my friends out there, no family out there. And I didn't have to work, but I wanted to, so I could have social time. He found a job for me that was on his route, so someplace that he stopped every day. And I'm pretty sure it was just to kind of check up on me, make sure I was actually there.
Well, yeah, I'm noticing just the way you're saying everything. It's like he decided we were going to move.
Yeah.
He found me a job. So was this someone then who was, I mean, he isolated you out in the middle of nowhere. He then took your car and went to work. So did you find yourself married to someone who was rather narcissistic and
Yeah.
just kind of, yeah, you were along for the ride at that point? And
Yeah. He was very much into like the headship principle. I mean, like, I was never going to be the perfect little Proverbs 31 wife or whatever they call it. I was never going to be that person because of my personality. But I think that he expected me to when we got married. And I was not going to change who I was, because when we got married, I was regular pioneering, going to college part-time and working full-time. And then I got married. And it was something had to go. And ended up being school and then work. I kept pioneering because that's what it was. I eventually stopped doing that. I did like 18 months of full-time pioneering, and then quit because I didn't want to do it. Yeah, so
the point you is in your story, you would not have had a car. So
right. Yeah. And I think basically that was part of the validation. I was like, why are you taking my car? Because, you're not using it. You're not going out in service. You're not doing anything. And they're like, plus they can pick you up. And I'm like, all right. So we moved even further away. And I was just really miserable. I had one friend out there that I made. And that was pretty much it. I really tried to connect to the congregation out there, but I couldn't do it. And I had a little dog. And then one day I was like, I'm going to adopt a kitten because that makes sense. When you're unhappy, just get an animal. Really unhealthy, by the way. Don't do that. I got
right, but you're looking for love and affection.
Yeah, and it was the sweetest little kitten. And he hated the cat. One day the cat he was still a teeny tiny little kitten, had crawled up the blinds and was like destroying them. And he backhanded the cat. And like, I was just like, oh no, like you can be an asshole to me, but you're not going to touch my kitten. Again, it's like, I don't really care what happens to me, but like, don't mess with my cat. And I decided then that I got in his face, and he wasn't a super like physically abusive person, except for that time with the cat when I got it up in his face. But he was very emotionally abusive and would like, if I didn't do the dishes, he would take a picture of it and send it to the elders. Like he was that kind of dude.
Good Lord.
Yeah. And he was the kind of guy I'm like looking back.
That is petty.
And I liked him because he had a truck, which was not something a lot of witnesses had. Because it wasn't a 4-door vehicle for service. He was in a band, which also not a lot of witnesses did. And I was like, okay. And the music thing, again, I was like really into the music. Like I wanted to be in the music scene. And he had a really good job, and he had gone to college, which is again not a typical witness thing. So I thought he might be a little different, but no. Yeah, so it was very much like he wanted a little Susie Homemaker, which is totally fine, but that wasn't me, and that was never going to be me. As hard as I may try. But after that incident, I was like, I'm gonna move. Like I have to leave, but I'm stuck. Like, what am I gonna do? And I was still drinking very heavily. By that time, I had also started to use pills a little bit. My job that he got me, my coworker was actually a total pill popper. So unbeknownst to my husband, I was buying pills from my coworker. And then I made a really good friend on my video game, and we got very, very close. And that person actually helped me to plan to leave. And he was just basically like, you don't deserve to be unhappy and miserable. He's like, I know that it's church. He was like, but, and I talked to him about like leaving and getting disfellowship because you leave. And I was just like, this is going to happen and I'm going to get shunned by my family. And so, and he was like, you can do this. Like, here's the steps that you need to take. So I got a separate bank account. I started putting like $10 in here, $10 in there. This guy paid for my phone for a couple months, to kind of like a second phone so that I could like be able to talk and like do things. And then when it came time to move, he actually sent me some money to like actually physically help me move out, which was incredible. And I'm very, very grateful. In spite of how that we're not friends anymore, unfortunately. But
I
at
was
the
gonna say, was
time,
this all done magnanimously, or was this person interested in a relationship?
oh no, he was interested in a relationship.
Okay.
And I really wanted to. I had feelings for him too. I won't lie. But I mean, he lived in another state. We only talked over video games. We played a lot together, and I'm very grateful for that because there was a really, really bad day where I had taken a little bit too much pills. And I was drinking too, and I was on the phone with him, and he was just like, "No," he's like, "Go stick your finger down your throat, and you're gonna be fine." And he was on the phone with me all night, and my husband was in the other room playing a video game the whole time, all the day. And I'm like,
Oh wow.
yeah. So it was, in a lot of ways, he saved my life in that moment, and just giving me the strength to kind of exit the situation. And I didn't know what to do because I'm like, I can't move in with my parents again. Number one, that's looked for me as like that's a failure for me if I move back to mom and dad. Um, Not only for me, but for I don't want to go back to my home congregation. Like I don't want that. So I asked my grandma if I could move in. My grandma she had struggled with. My parents have been married my whole life, right, and they're still married now. My grandma has been married multiple times. She understands a little bit differently than my parents ever could. Also, so I moved in with my grandma while we were in the process of getting divorced. I started some paperwork pretty quickly. Um, and around that time, this guy that I was talking to that helped me move, I told him all about my biological dad stuff. And he was like, "What was his name again?" And I told him his name. And a couple days later, he was like, "I found him on MySpace." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He was like, is this your bio dad?" And I was like, "Might be." So I showed my grandma, and my grandma was like, "Yep, that's him." And it showed he lived like 30 minutes from me.
Oh
And then it
wow.
also showed that he had two kids, which were obviously not me. So I was like, "Oh, I have siblings. Oh, dear God." Um, so he was like, "I can reach out." And I was like, "Nope, I just need to think about this for a few days." He called me about a week later. He was like, "Hey, so your 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 bio dad emailed me back." And I was like, "Back? What do you mean back? You emailed him?" He was like, "Yeah, I emailed him." Basically, so that's how I was facilitated to meet my biological father. So the following week, I'm in the middle of getting divorced. And when I moved into my grandma, like her stipulation was that I went with her to the meeting. Fine. I didn't tell anybody at her congregation that I was getting divorced. I didn't tell them that I was ever married. I just kind of showed up and did my thing. Um, there was a brother there that told people that he was interested in me, and so then the elders decided to tell him that I was still married, and then it got around, and I was just like, "Thanks for that." So anyway, I was in the process of that, and then my biological father came into my life. So I met him, my brother, my sister, and my grandmother all on the same day.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So that was really trippy. Just to kind of
Well, again, you hadn't been the one to initiate this contact either, so
no,
that's
and I probably would have, but I wasn't ready for it.
right.
Um, but it was the only reason I really did is because of the kids. Because I'd always wanted siblings since I was a little kid.
Sure.
I was like, wow, there's siblings. This is really weird. My sister called me like the next day before I'd even met her, and she was 11, and she was like, "Hey, you don't know me, but I'm your sister." It was really cute. And then my brother was just obnoxious. They were 13 and 11, and I was 20, 23. So
Mhm.
that was really interesting meeting them. And I'm so grateful for that now. And I was grateful for that then, but in a different way. I was just really confused because everything in my life was changing again. And I also, again, felt like it was not under my control. Um, yeah, so that was early adulthood. My divorce was finalized a little bit, and I remember meeting my ex-husband on our last meeting, because I told him that I was working at, I think I just got my job at Starbucks, and I got a tattoo. I was like living my life. And I told him about the tattoo, and I remember what he was like, wow, how far you've fallen. And I was like, get out of here with that. Like, miss me with that. He was such a pompous ass. Like, I cannot even, even the elders would told me that, like, he was like, he's a pompous ass. And I'm like, you said ass? Wow. First of all, but like, yeah, you're right. Like, he is. And it was just, everything was so critical. And getting divorced was like huge, just like weight off my shoulders at that point.
Oh, I imagine.
Yeah.
Was so getting a divorce, obviously, in the organization is very much frowned upon. So, what was the outcome of that happening? I guess, yeah. What was the outcome of the divorce? Who initiated it? Like, did that play into how they came down on you or both of you?
It did. So he was not super active at meetings. I still was. And when I moved, I was very desperate to get out. And as you know, like with witnesses, the only scriptural grounds for divorce is adultery of some kind.
Yep.
Somebody has to have sex with somebody else to make that happen. And unbeknownst to me, he had already done that. I didn't know that until much later. But I was already separated, and I was like I said, I didn't want to tell anybody that I was in the process of getting divorced, because then it's just, I wasn't even going to tell the elders that I was getting divorced. I just wanted to do it, and I would deal with the consequences later. Um, and I was ready to get disfellowshipped. I was ready for it. I talked to this dude. I was like, okay, I'm gonna get disfellowshipped, and I'm gonna move in. I'm gonna move to you. Like, panic, right? So I didn't end up getting disfellowshipped, because I did end up, just after we were separated, I went and I just like dated this guy, and I slept with this guy because I really just wanted out. I wanted out, and I was so miserable, and I was tired of being talked to down to. I needed out. But I was ready to like be disfellowshipped. Like, I knew in my head, I knew I was going to be disfellowshipped, because you kind of go into that understanding. If you like, I did it intentionally. I did it intentionally because I needed to be out of my marriage. Because I was going to keep drinking. I was going to keep using pills. I was going to keep being miserable if I stayed. And that
Sure.
was going to kill me eventually. Like, I was not going to make it. And so I had to do something. And that's what I chose to do at the time. And
Many do.
I didn't get disfellowshipped, shockingly. I was so shocked that I didn't get disfellowshipped. I had a plane ticket bought to go see this guy, and I got on the phone with him, and I was like, I can't come. I can't come to see you. Like, I didn't think that I was going to have a second chance. And I was like really grateful to stay in the organization. I was so happy to be there. And so I broke it off with him, and I came back to the witnesses. And I moved back home. I still didn't have my privileges of answering. But I did my time. I did my things. I studied with the sister, and I got all that stuff back. And it is what it is. I was a young adult now with a divorce under my belt. I'd never thought that I was gonna, like, well, I guess I'm just gonna be single forever. Because once you're divorced, you're kind of like, used goods at that point,
Yep.
especially as a woman. Like, you're not.
I see in the organization as a woman, yeah.
Yeah. So I was just, all right, well, whatever. So I was like partying and making friends and having, the best time that I could. And then I ended up getting married again, because they told me that because of that. Like, and then I also found out that he had cheated on me while we were married. So I was free, and in my head, I never really cared about being scripturally free. That wasn't, I don't, it's whatever. Like, is that real? I don't know. But, I mean, it's not, obviously, but at the time I was just like, we'll see, it's fine. But a lot happened around that time. About 4 years after my first divorce, my grandfather killed himself. And
Sorry.
that was awful.
Yeah, it's horrible.
He lived next door to me my entire life. Um, and he was not a witness. He said actually what made him not want to be a witness was the fact that we had to love our enemy, which made me laugh. I'm like, I understand that.
He's
Like,
kind of into accountability too, in some ways. It
and
sounds like.
no, like I like that. Okay, that's valid. Um, but around that time, one of my very good friends, because I had been developing a very good social circle, of like going out and going to karaoke and going to shows and just like enjoying my life as much as I could. Um, and then one of my close friends had actually shared with me that his brother had killed himself when he was 14, and that was a bonding point for us. And then we started dating and we got married in 2012.
Mm.
And we were together about 6 months, and he was like, I've caught him on like Craigslist ads soliciting sex from people. And I was
Oh,
just like,
wow.
yeah, like 6 months after we got married. And I'm like, hell no. Like, we just got married. Like, I am not going to be divorced twice because you want to act a fool. So I was like, no, it doesn't matter. We're just staying married regardless. Because that was like, I was like, no, this is working. Like, I'm not going to be divorced twice at like 27 years old. Like, that's not happening to me. And I should have just been divorced at 27 years old. That should have just been okay with me because I stayed way too long. But we were married and I got my job at Starbucks. I was like, I'm gonna go back to school because they paid for school, and I was just like, I'm gonna do this because I never did it before. And if I am gonna hate my life, at least I'm gonna be educated and hate my life. And so I applied to school, I got in, and I started going to college. That didn't go over well so much with my congregation. They didn't like that I was in school. So I didn't really tell a whole lot of people. But that was kind of a really like life-changing experience for me because it was online school. So I was like, I'm not getting the association, but I was getting knowledge that I would never have gotten otherwise, and reading books that I never would have read otherwise, and opening my mind to new concepts. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, I really love learning, and I feel like I'm finally not being lied to. Like, it's things I can read, and like, it was awesome. And it's a school, so it's all relative, really. But it was a very transformative experience for me. And then that year, we decided that we wanted to have a kid, because that makes people happy, right? Have a baby will make things better.
Like a kitten, but better.
Yes, right. I was like,
But
sure.
more work. Sure.
So around that time, also, wait, no. So we did the in vitro fertilization attempt.
Mm.
Did not work. We didn't tell a lot of people we did that.
Wow, that's tough.
Yeah. It didn't work. And looking back, I'm very grateful it didn't work. After it didn't work, I was, of course, feeling I was very emotional. It was really hard. Because in that scope in my life, I really did want to be a mom and have kids and all of that. And I did think that he would be a good dad. He was a very nice person. Like, we got along really well. We were close friends before we got married. So like, it was nothing that he was doing that was like an issue besides, the cheating, whatever. Like I said, was not about to get divorced again. But we worked through that, and it was 5 years in when we started the process of trying to have a child. Once it didn't take, so we had spent a lot of money. I had a couple surgeries. Like, it was a hard process. And it didn't work. So he had told me, he was like, well, I'm kind of relieved because I really didn't want to have a kid anyway. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me this when we started this process months ago? What is actually wrong with you? I was so angry. Because it's hard, and it was very hard on my body and very hard on my mental.
Yeah,
And
you're putting yourself through hell to have this kid, and he's
yeah. And I'm like, again,
so laissez-faire about the whole thing. Like, oh, I'm glad we didn't anyway, whatever.
I felt like I was being lied to, because I'm like, why did you tell me so much that like you were into this, and you like helped me with the stuff, and you came to like my doctor's appointments with me? It was really upsetting. And I got very like detached at that moment, like going through all of that. And then I had already kind of like stopped going to meetings regularly, and developed friendships outside of the congregation, with some people that I met at work and some like customers that worked at Starbucks. And they knew that I was a witness, and they were like, "Oh, you're in a cult, you're in a cult." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." And I gave them the, the spiel that we give people when they say we're in a cult, and we learn what to say from that little, Anyway, so I was like defending still. But I was also on like a lot of like anti-anxiety medication, and just like I was not doing well like mentally after this whole experience. And I was very unhappy with the fact that my husband was lying to me about wanting to have a kid. Like that was a really big deal to me. And I was just like, I would never have gone through it, like gone through all that process if I had known that this is how you felt. Like I wouldn't have done that to myself. So anyway, I ended up that year, I got disfellowshipped. It was 2016. It was my second year. It was my last year of school. So I was going to get my bachelor's while I was disfellowshipped. And I was still married at the time. So I got disfellowshipped for smoking weed, which is insane. They're like, "How did you learn?" They're like, "Where did you get it?" And I'm like, "Store." Because it became legal here. And they were like, "Well, how did you know how to smoke it?" I'm like, "I don't know how to answer your question. You light it on fire and you inhale." Like, I'm like, "Are you asking for your own benefit?" I was very confused at their questions.
See, wait a minute, but you're getting called in and getting this fellowship for smoking weed. Your husband was a witness, right? And he
Yep.
was going on Craigslist soliciting things. Of course, I guess you weren't going to the elders with that, or
I did make him talk to the elders about that.
okay.
And he got like a slap on the wrist and a don't do it
Okay.
again, because he never actually followed through with it. So it didn't count.
Okay, but you smoke. He didn't. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I don't know about that.
How many people are out there soliciting and not following through? Like,
I
would
have
this
no
like to
idea.
be a tease? I don't know, whatever. But now you are gonna get this fellowship for
Yeah.
smoking weed,
Mhm. Yep.
which was legal
Yes.
in
Yep.
Washington or whatever, or I
There
don't
was
know
some
where.
other stuff that was like on my like rap sheet or whatever that they approached me about, but the weed was the big kicker.
Oh, but you had priors, so this is now a
I had friends,
pattern.
yeah. Yeah, they brought
Okay.
it all from 10 years before, from my first marriage. They brought that up against me. And I'm like, "Bro, like, are you serious?" I'm like, "A pattern? Because I did one thing that was entirely different 10 years ago? Okay, that's fine." Um, Great. Great. Um, yeah, so I got disfellowshipped. And it was crazy because I wasn't even going to turn myself in. But once again, I trusted my very good friend, who is still a friend of mine to this day. Uh, and I told her about what was going on in life, and she started acting kind of distant. And I was like, "Well, great. Like, she's probably gonna not want to hang out with me anymore," which is her decision. So then she comes and wants to meet with me, and she had 3 kids at the time, just had her twins, and she was like, "You have to talk to the elders." And I'm like, "For real? Like, are you serious?" And she's just like, "Yeah." She's like, "I don't care what happens to me, but like, I need my kids to make it through Armageddon." I'm just like,
So I have to tell on
"Yep,
you so that my kids make it through Armageddon, because if I don't tell on you, I'm a bad person and would be a sharer in your sins.
yep,
And therefore, and the whole witness ideology of if Armageddon comes, it's
yeah,
the parents' record that will determine whether or not Jehovah kills their kids.
yep, yep." It
Okay.
took me back to the drama with Aiken
Fantastic.
being killed. Um,
Fantastic.
yeah, and I was just like, the look in her eyes, just like she was genuinely hurt by this, and like I had that was kind of the moment where I was just like, "This, my friends were right. This is a cult. This is crazy. Like, what the heck?" But like, this is somebody that like I love this person. She's very near and dear to me still, and her heart was breaking. Like, she really believed this with every fiber of her being, that her
She was
kids were
wrong.
going
She
to
was
hell.
sincere, but
Yeah,
possibly sincerely wrong, but
yeah, and I'm just
sincere
like,
and concerns and wanting to protect her kids. That's
Mhm.
so sad. And you also just see how they create this behavior control through
Yeah.
this accountability,
Yep.
and that you're responsible for other people and
Yep.
things like that. Create a snitch culture.
Yep. And that's why I talked to elders about that. And it was, I didn't want her to have to do it. And I knew that she was going to. And she was like, when you're holding on to something and stress and trauma, you get physically ill. And she was very much like she was getting physically sick from this. And I just was like, fine, like it's fine. And yeah, so they disfellowshipped me. and, I was, I told everybody I'll be back. Like, this is not permanent. This is, when I was still like mentally in, but still realizing that this was bad for me anyways. Um, at that point I was like, this is going to suck. But, my husband, like, he was wanting to work things out, and we were going to stay together. And he had been doing really well in the congregation. He was like doing mics and doing sound and stuff like that, and on track to be an MS. So we stayed married, and I was disfellowship for a year. In that year, his mother passed away, so I got to go to her witness funeral, where nobody spoke to me the entire time, but I sat in the front. I went to every meeting for the whole year. He was still doing sound at the beginning of it, and he asked me to sit by him doing the sound, and I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, somebody's gonna have issue with that. Like, I'm not gonna sit
Yeah,
by
I
you.
was gonna say, would they allow that? I don't think
So
so.
then he insisted, and then of course they pulled him off the sound because I'm not supposed to do that. And I was just like,
Yeah.
you should have, like, nobody listens to me, and this is what happened.
Yeah, you can't
Um,
have your wife, even though she's your wife, sit
no,
with you because her shunned
yep,
cooties will rub off on the sound equipment and
exactly.
Satan will
I was to
start
be seen
speaking
and
against
not
me.
noticed. Basically, I was to be counted by the elders, and then never to be acknowledged or noticed again. Um, that year, I also got invited to a family wedding. I have some family members that are not witnesses, and I went. That was the one thing I got invited to for my family all year. My grandparents did not acknowledge me the entire time. Um, my parents at this time had already moved down to California, so they were not around, but we were renting their house. Um, so I did have, business contact with them, so to speak. Uh, but then I also graduated college that year, and none of my family knew that I had done college or graduated college or anything like that.
Oh,
I
they didn't
completely,
even know you were in college?
some did,
Mm.
but it wasn't something I was really open about because it's kind of frowned upon. It's very frowned upon. Um, and I would have been my grandma. My grandma went to college later in life, so I felt good about that because she went and did it, so I was going to do it.
No, that's cool.
Um,
It's just sad that you can't even tell your witness family that you're in college. I mean, to have
yeah,
to hide the shame of education,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
really
I told
backwards.
some. I told some people, but because it was something for me that I was really proud of. I really enjoyed
Could
going
have
to
been,
school,
yeah.
and I had always wanted to get higher education. That was kind of what I wanted, and I never had the opportunity until then. But I did finish. I had a very tiny graduation party with a very few amount of friends and coworkers that I had. I was still living next door to my witness grandma at the time, who was very confused as to what was going on over at the house, that there was a party. Um, and so she thought I got reinstated and just never told them. And I was like, nope, not yet. And that year I spent a lot of introspective time, because you don't, when you're at the meeting, I didn't have anything to do,
Mhm.
but look at the back of people's heads. And when you're looking at the back of people's heads, you're observing a lot, and you can see, like not everything is as happy as it seems like it is. And you can tell a lot from just observing. Usually when I was at the Kingdom Hall, I was like looking at my watchtower or like focused on but this time I got to like really see, and I was like, wow, this is really messed up. Like, this is super messed up. And that year is kind of when I woke up, from under, like, just, I could see that it wasn't what it was told me. Like, I was still being lied to, like, about everything else. Um, but was like, well, I already made the commitment that I was coming back, so I'm gonna come back.
Once again, right? It's like, but I made a commitment, so now I've got to do this thing.
So
Even
I was still like mentally in it, but I knew it was not right.
and again, more the people. It sounds like you
Yep.
realized. So
Yep.
were you shunned by? So were you like? I know you were. You said that you had the necessary contact with your family. Were you shunned by your parents, though?
Yep.
Otherwise,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
And
Everybody everybody that was a witness in my life just shunned me.
if you're feeling stuck in your life after cult involvement and can't find the life you want, leaving a cult is a new beginning on a path to healing, not some magical end itself that is healing. Relief from the immediate pain feels good at first, but that's not necessarily true happiness. The feelings of social awkwardness and isolation, lack of self worth, perfectionism, patterns of being attracted to emotionally unavailable people, not even knowing who you are yourself. All of these things and more are lingering effects of that environment. Being in a cult isn't just following a doctrine, but it's following a culture, a way of life, a way of being that doesn't just go away because you stopped attending meetings. If you want to shortcut the path to healing instead of trying to figure it out on your own, maybe even work with me professionally in my cult recovery coaching practice, you can find opportunities to do that and also for other cool resources at my website, exjwhelp.com. That's exjwhelp.com.
Yep.
And what about in the home with your husband at the time? Did
Yes.
he treat you any differently now that you were disfellowshipped?
Um, Not necessarily. He definitely was like concerned about how he would still be like a spiritual head. I'm like, okay, like he did his own thing. I did my own thing. At that point, we were kind of more just, this was after the IVF stuff. So I had a lot of resentment towards him for that. And we were kind of existing as roommates at that point. But again, also, I'm like, I'm still not going to be 30 now and divorced like twice. Like, that's just, nope, not happening. So I was very stuck in like, I still am going to do this because this is my family heritage. This is what we do. We're witnesses. And I'm going to not be the one that breaks that cycle. Like, I really didn't want to break the witness as a cycle of being a witness in my family. Like, I didn't want to be the one that left. Yeah.
That's tough. I mean, it is your only family and everything. Although you had other family, I guess, that you had
Yeah.
gotten in touch with as well. But it's been such a stable. So it's just been such a presence. Maybe I shouldn't say a stability, but it's just been a
Yeah.
presence in your life. And so,
Well, for me, it was stable because that was all that I knew. This was my comfort
yeah, I'm just
zone.
saying it's creating a lot of pain and
Oh,
turmoil and the lack of stability.
yeah.
But I understand it feels like
True
it's the thing
stability,
that's going to
absolutely
fix
not.
everything, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
true stability, no.
yeah,
No.
yeah, yeah. So so during the year that you were disfellowshipped, well, and I don't know how much longer it may have gone on, but were you writing letters seeking reinstatement? Were you having meetings with the elders? Were they active in following up with you? Like, what was the situation that you were involved in there as far as trying to get back?
I wrote a letter at 6 months,
Okay.
and that was rejected. They said there needed to be more time, and I was like,
You need to
okay.
grovel more.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, well, and I deleted that letter, and I wish I didn't because I want to see the difference. But I know that first letter was like whatever. The second letter after a year was very grovelly and very much like I'm I'm a worthless piece of shit without this organization. And that was like I just said it in like 18 different ways and like quoted scriptures, and it was a good written letter. I was really proud of it. But at that point, it was more of like an academic feat for me than what I actually was feeling. Because by the time I actually got reinstated, which was almost like a little bit over a year, like a year and a month, I had already fully like decided I was not going to be a witness in the future, but I did feel that obligation because I told everybody I was going to come back. And I didn't want them to be right about me. Like I still wanted to have something to prove for some reason, like that
Sure.
I was not a failure, I guess.
Again, appearance is everything to
Yeah.
Jehovah's Witnesses more than substance. So
Yeah.
you've got to appear to be doing the thing.
Yep.
And if you don't, then you lose all your
Yeah.
relationships. So
And it was again like, so getting reinstated was awesome. They loved me so much for a month or so. Everybody welcomed me back with open arms, and then it all just kind of dropped. Because for the first month, I was like excited to be back in. I got to see my friends. I talked to my family. Like, I updated them on my life. My friend that had asked me to tell on myself before all this happened, like, her and I were able to reconnect, and I knew she felt really bad. She was the only one that kind of like messaged me throughout throughout being disfellowshipped, like,
sure.
and that's, which was awesome. It was honestly sustaining, to know that somebody still did care about me, because I had felt it was awful. Like, being disfellowshipped is not something I wish on anybody, because it's like, you in a second, everything is gone. um, that's not something you can prepare yourself for. As much as you can prepare yourself for, you think you cannot.
No, I disassociated and I knew what was coming and
Yeah,
it's still well, I guess in my case there was a lot of immediate relief, but it's still weird
yeah,
to just know like you're a ghost to these people. You
yep.
can't if you see them out, they won't talk to you. They'll
They would
run
turn
away
around and
from you
leave.
or expect you to run away from them or
Yep,
whatever.
yep. And then even when I was at work, if I would see them, like, it was so uncomfortable. Like, everything was just uncomfortable. I dreaded seeing witnesses because I didn't want, and they would always smile at me like when they weren't supposed to, and I'm just like, that's supposed to make me feel good, because it doesn't.
Yeah.
Um,
Feels condescending at a point. What
Super.
is?
I'm like, you can literally, like, you've known me since I was 2 years old. You can literally come and say hi to me. I'm not dead. Um, but that was a really tough experience. It was. I'm very fortunate that I built a good support system before I went out. And my friends were very, very patient with me, because they knew that I still was not quite to the point where I was like, yes, this is bad and I need to leave. Um, they just wanted to support me, make sure I was okay, because I was not happy in my marriage. I was not happy in my life. And now I had lost everybody that I loved. So it was like a really bad time. But I was also doing such great things. Like, I was graduating school, and I was starting a new career, and I was enjoying my friendships, and I was going to shows, and I was having a lot of great things happen. So it was hard for me to understand why everything that was making me happy and bringing me life was going to bring me eternal destruction, according to the witnesses. Like, I just, I couldn't make that connection in my mind. Um, and that's actually probably what woke me up. Was like, okay, I was so strict on my association, but honestly, these people are bringing me life right now, and they were there for me when nobody else was, that I've known my whole life. And they're now, like, they're still in my life now. They're like my chosen family. We spend holidays together, and like days off, vacations. Like, that's my chosen family, and I love them for it. I'm very grateful, for the friends that I made during that time period. And they were still there for me when I got reinstated. They were fully supportive if I wanted to go back. Um, and I would argue with them too about going back, and they were like, maybe you should just not go back. And I'm like, no, I'd like to talk to my parents again, blah, blah, blah. So I was very much bought in still, and justifying why shunning was okay in my situation. It's like,
You
yeah,
deserved it.
this is great. No. Um, then when I did get reinstated, like I said, a lot of love bombing. Um, and it felt amazing. Like, I was like, I feel normal again, but I didn't feel normal, but I didn't like feeling that way, because that wasn't normal. It's not normal to it's not good. Even if it was normal for me, that wasn't healthy, and it wasn't safe, and it wasn't enjoyable. It was
Like you said, it doesn't last.
it doesn't last. That it maybe a couple weeks. Um, and I was like, wow, this is really bad. Um, And my marriage had also not gone well in the last year. I think me being disfellowshipped, my husband didn't really feel like he had to, I don't want to say be nice to me, but he didn't really feel like he had to be a husband to me. Um, and he started being a little bit more pushy with things, specifically around like sex. Um, I'm learning that this is kind of a theme among a few Jehovah's Witness men as I've talked to some other people, but really not understanding what consent means, even in marriage.
Well, there's no
Um,
empathy
no,
within the organization. There's no perspective taking.
no,
Everybody's kind of about themselves and about the truth, and
yeah,
they can't read the room or take account
yep,
of anybody else. So in their marriages as well, there's also this entitlement and such. It's just boy, it is set up for
yeah,
bad things, and then now you're kind of an unperson as a disfellowship
yeah,
person. So are you really even human anymore?
exactly, exactly.
Also,
And
he
it
could be
was,
mad and punishing you. I
mhm,
don't know, but anyway, yeah.
it was very dehumanizing, and it was a rough experience. And it was really, for me, I had always been a really strong person. I felt like I was a really strong person, and this made me feel like nothing. It made me feel like nothing. And I was not going to take that. And so I was like, the elders will help me. The elders will help me. Um, because my dad was an elder, and my dad was like the only elder that I trusted, really. After being disfellowshipped, I just thought it was all a bunch of bull. But um, the elders were there to help me, is what my little brain told me. Um, so I talked to the elders about this, and I was like, I can't live with this person anymore. Like, this is not, I'm not okay with this. Because I had decided to move out. So I started seeing a therapist and I moved out. And of course, they were like, "You're moving out. Why? Like, is he being physically abusive to you? Is he preventing you from being a Jehovah's Witness? Like, all the things that you might be allowed, right? That you might be allowed to do if to leave for, like, the grounds for leaving. Severe spiritual danger." I'm like, no, he's like not understanding consent in this marriage. Like, I am not okay with being told what I'm going to do when I'm going to do it, and then not listen to, like, I'm not doing that. Like, that's rape. Like, I'm not doing that. And they read the scripture to me about the marriage due. I don't remember what scripture that is, but I was just like, okay. And that was the last time I've ever spoken to an elder, and that's the last time I ever will. Because I was taken. I'm still like in shock that I was even told this back in the day. But like, how insulting. How can you look somebody in the eye and just tell them like, oh, you owe them? Like, no, like, that's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's horrendous. You know, they have to render, the husband and wife must render to each one their due. Um, and like their due, their due, like paying dues. Like, what
Yeah,
is this? Like, it's just yeah, I mean, there's nothing more romantic than like, hey, I think we're due. Like, what the hell? Who
yeah,
does that? That's it,
yeah,
and it gets back to that entitlement, right? It's like it's almost ownership. Like, well,
yeah,
I own you
yep,
as my spouse, and so therefore, if I want something, I can have it.
yeah. And the elders basically told me that it was my fault, and I should be more open to, having those types of relations. And
Yeah.
um, yeah, that was. I was like, okay, well, I'm never going to talk to the elders again. Okay, like, so I was gonna be single for the rest of my life because I'm not living with this man anymore. So
Again, you were disfellowship for smoking weed,
yes, yep,
right?
yeah,
Smoking weed, non-consensual activities in a marriage.
about the same, but weed is way
You know,
worse. Um, and I was still smoking weed at that point. I was like, if I'm gonna have to live like this, like, I'm okay. Um, and that is what it is. But then I moved. I moved out on my own, and it was like the first time I'd been able to like move out on my own. And like, I bought a car that was like really impractical for field service, and I felt like I was being myself for the first time. This is after I was reinstated. I was still going to meetings like once in a while. And then the last meeting I went to, because people will ask me like, when is the last meeting you went to? Like, why did you stop going to meetings? And I will always tell people the same story. And it was when a sister that I'd known my whole life, she was so kind. She had a very abusive husband. She raised 2 girls. She was giving a comment from the watchtower and it was the wrong paragraph. Happens to everybody, right? This elder, the audacity, he told her to be quiet and that she was answering the wrong question. He interrupted her and basically was like, be quiet. And I was like, oh no, I'm not going to sit here and watch that. And the look on her face, she was just like crestfallen. And I was just like, you just brought her back to when her husband was like abusing her. Like I could see it in her eyes. And I was just like, how dare you be so brazenly unkind to this person because you're in a position of power on the stage. And I got up and I walked out and I never went back to a meeting after that. Like that was my last meeting. And that was probably about 4 months after being reinstated.
Isn't it interesting how we can sometimes go through so much on our own. We can be treated poorly and such, but sometimes it's seeing somebody else be treated poorly that can, in a moment, help us to take a stand that we should have taken for ourselves, but we've been beaten down to the point where we don't, others may have value, but maybe we really don't. And I'm glad that happened so that you could see it and walk out. I hope she did too someday, but but again, it happened to her, so maybe she'll have to see it happen to somebody else, and then she'll in the right time and headspace be able to see it. But I'm glad that kind of shook you free a bit, and we're like, this is not a good place. This isn't healthy.
No, and I was still like, I think I went to one memorial after that, but that was it. I haven't been to any since then, and that was in 2017, late 2017 was the last time I went to any meetings. And that, like, I was still in, and I was still like, okay, I just disappeared. I got off social media for a while. I was like, I'm just gonna live my life and see what happens. Like, I'm going to therapy. I'm working. I'm living by myself. Like, enjoying my life, being free, and finding out who I am. And that was so powerful, but it was also like, I don't want to hide, but I felt like I had to. And it really took a lot to get to a point where I'm just like, I'm actually okay to be myself. It was amazing. And I started to be honest with people about my life. Like I had moved in with my brother. My brother and my sister and I are very close now, which is so great. Ironically, they were raised Mormon. So it's like, my brother had a type, didn't he? But we're three of us are close, and I lived with my brother for about a year, and then like I started seeing somebody, and we like lived together for a couple of years, and that was the time when I started to like open up, because I was not ashamed of my life. Like I loved my job, I loved my friends, I loved the people in my life, and I wanted to share that with my family. Like that's normal. Like you want to share these things with your family. But I was very secretive because I knew that I was never going to go back. I didn't want to hear it from them. Of course, when they found out about like the fact that I was living with my partner, that was a huge issue for them. They did want to meet him, and they were very nice when they met him. At the beginning, they definitely like told me their opinions and sent me articles, and I did have to have a conversation with them. And I'm like, listen, if I get disfellowshipped again, I'm not coming back. Like, I'm not going to do this. So that's on you. If you choose to rat me out or give my address to the elders, you can do that. But like, just so you know, if that happens, I'm out. I've been through it once. I can do it again. Like, you want to talk about how bad this hurts you? Like, I'm the one that got shunned.
Yeah.
But I've realized that I'm stronger than that. And if that did happen, or they like remotely disfellowship me, or if I do choose to disassociate one day, like okay, that's fine. I don't have to answer to these rules that are made up by people. Like they're not. It's not my jam anymore. I'm not living for others. I'm not living for an organization that doesn't care about me. I'm not doing that.
Good. Nor should you have ever had to. That whole thing where you're talking about how great it feels to get to be you. Uh, Man, can you imagine? I mean, obviously, I didn't get to have this either, but can you imagine being a teenager and being taught to help to figure out who you are and what you wanted and guided to be that best version of yourself, whoever that is, and to be able to be put on that path from a young age instead of having to. So, how old were you, I guess, when you were trying to figure this out? Like in your 30s, I guess?
Yeah, so I was 32, I think, when I like left. Um, and I struggled a lot with like because like you said, I should never had to do this. It's not something that, and I struggled a lot with
Oh.
that. And sometimes it still pops up where I'm like, man, I am so behind in life. I'm so behind in life, and I just have to really understand that like I am in some people's viewpoints, but like I don't have to have that viewpoint. I am
Oh.
as far ahead as I possibly can be with circumstances that I was given. And
Mhm.
I'm so grateful to have been able to experience life the way it should be at some point in my life. Even if I was 60 and got out, I would still be grateful for that because it's it's amazing. And like the best thing about not having to follow those rules is to be able to love unconditionally.
Mhm.
That's my favorite thing about being free, honestly. Like
Mm.
it feels so much better than to snitch on people and to find faults and to nitpick. It just to just unabashedly love people. It's great.
Yeah. Can I add to that loving yourself
Yes.
unconditionally? That's pretty
Yeah.
cool too, isn't it?
Yep. It is. And like to appreciate myself and to not think that I'm a terrible person because I have a negative thought or I say something that that may not have been the nicest thing. It doesn't mean that I'm a terrible person. It means that I'm a human being
Yeah.
um, with thoughts and feelings and emotions and ability to make critical decisions for myself. Critical thinking is like my favorite thing now.
Okay, so let me ask you about that critical thinking. So, a couple times throughout your story, you have had moments where you noticed that the people in the organization maybe weren't to be trusted. How did you get to a point where you used that critical thinking? What did it look like to use that critical thinking and to be able to start looking beyond just the way the people behaved and the toxicity there to where you started looking at the organization itself or
Mm.
the teachings or whatever the case may be? How did you start breaking down? Was there anything that helped you in breaking down the doctrines or the organization and its activities itself? Where did you start learning those things so that you could exercise that critical thinking?
Yeah, the first like ex-JW video that I watched was somebody's story on YouTube, and it felt so familiar. And it was the stories of people that got me to look further because then they would mention like, and then I looked and pulled the thread and everything started to unravel, and I was like, oh, better do that. Um, and it was scary to do that. I'm not a huge doctrine person. Like I don't like the dates. I don't know that stuff. I know what I was taught, and I know like yes, you believe in this because of whatever. But then to look at the doctrines and to know that half of it's just bullshit and made up dates and like I said, once you pull the thread, everything starts to just kind of fall apart. And it's just like domino effect. So one thing after another. So the first thing that got me was the stories. And then when they mentioned that they looked up doctrines, I was like, oh, well, that's kind of bad because doctrines are how the whole thing is based on. Yikes. And then it was quick. It was quick for me. I love information, and I still love to read, and so I was just reading everything I can get my hands on. Um, I had to use a lot of critical thinking to dissect some of that as well because people's stories are going to be very different.
Sure.
And even people who have left, the organization, are going to have different experiences. And sometimes, yeah, absolutely, there's going to be people who are disgruntled or whatever. But there's so much
Because
truth.
they've been hurt.
Yeah, they've been hurt. There's so much truth in the stories, even if
Yeah.
they're like, well, you can't listen to everything you see because people are just mad that they got disfellowshipped. And I'm like, damn right they are mad they got disfellowshipped. Like their entire community turned their back on them. Like what? And really just, yeah, once you start looking for stuff, oof, there's a lot. And then seeing just like all the things that I thought were scriptural but are not, and then it's like, really, but why did I believe this for so long when there's nothing even in the Bible that says that? Do I even believe in the Bible at this point? And so just kind of like everything, just it was a whirlwind in my head. And I was very much that person that wanted to share everything, like the Australian Royal Commission. That was a big one for me.
Oh yeah.
I tried sharing that. That was a failure. I
Try
learned
sharing that with whom?
my mom.
And how was it a failure?
She said that they can alter it to make it look like the governing body speaking.
Yeah, so in other words, it's not real. These videos have been doctored, right?
Yep.
It's always interesting that how Jehovah's Witnesses, if there's a news story or a video on the outside that says positive things about them, well, that's real. But if
Yeah.
it says anything negative, then it's automatically dismissed as though it's been doctored or something. But they would never have the same skepticism towards anything on jw.org or JW Broadcasting or
Right.
anything that's said from the platform. They'll just take all of that, no matter what is said, and that's automatically true with zero skepticism. But if something on the outside doesn't tickle their fancy, there must be some way that has been altered.
Yep.
It's
It
so
can possibly.
intellectually and emotionally dishonest.
Yeah. And
But that's the way they have to, again, lie to themselves.
Yep.
Talking about the honesty or lack thereof, they have to lie to themselves to keep doing what they're doing and going down the path that they too have been committed to multiple times in their lives.
Yeah, and I think it ultimately gets down to they don't want to open their eyes to these things.
They want
Because
to believe.
it's really awful. Like when you start learning that all of this stuff is a puff of smoke, it's just like it really hits you in like in waves, and it's awful. It's tragic to learn that everything that you believe and love and thought you loved, like everything that you is like a core part of your being is just fairy tale. You know, it's not even a fairy tale, but like it's based on lies. It's based on manipulation. It's based on what things look like rather than what things actually are. And they don't want to know the truth. They don't want to know the truth.
Nope.
And that's so frustrating. So
So
frustrating.
they want the comfort of being told they have the truth and feeling internally like they have it so that they don't have to look anymore. It's really intellectually lazy. But again, I understand why a person feels that way because the world's a scary place and we're out of control, hurtling through time and space on a giant rock, and anything can happen tomorrow, right? So I understand why people are afraid, but just because you're afraid doesn't mean that something that sounds comforting is true, just because it's said in a nice way.
Yeah. And I tried, like, I did do a pretty good try of like talking to my mom about this stuff. And I'm like, glad to like, yeah. So then I started going with logic. Okay, so what about all of the lawsuits against the organization throughout the country, against bodies of elders, you know, that this is the problem. Like this could, and I was like, this could impact dad, you know, as an elder. And she was like, well, that's why they have lawyers. And I'm like, who pays for the lawyers? I'm like, I told my mom I regret every cent I ever donated to this organization, because if they're using it to spend money to settle with child abuse victims out of court, like I don't want to have any part of that. And still, it was just like, nope, nothing. And I just blows my mind that it's just like the
You
level.
can't talk to them, can you?
No. And at that point, when I was like, oh, you don't want to know the truth. You can't handle this. Like you're not you're not open to even considering that there might be another way or anything that is another truth. There's no way, no way. And
Yeah.
I kind of gave that up a little bit, and I was like, okay, new approach, new approach. So then I just got very honest with everybody in life, and I was like, you know what, they've lived in a shroud of lies their entire life, and so did I, and I'm done with that. So we're just gonna be Captain Truth from now on. I tell everything. And so I was very honest about, like, we don't talk about witness stuff when I see them, because I do still see them once in a while. We don't talk about a lot of things, and they don't really ask me about my life beyond work, because there's nothing for them to really ask about. They don't interested in anything, because they don't have any other interests.
Well, see, that's the sad thing is
Yeah,
their other interest should be their daughter,
right.
and they should just be interested in you as a human and what you're interested in and how you work. But Jehovah's Witnesses are so self-absorbed with their own stuff that
Mhm.
if it's outside the purview of their teachings and their beliefs and their activities, they don't care to get to know anything outside of that, even when it's their own kid. And it's really sad because a lot of us, of course, we all want to have parents, right? I mean, who doesn't? And so, well-meaning people get around their parents and they're excited to have their parents in their lives, but their parents just aren't excited about them. It's it's really sad. There's just such a detachment there.
Yeah, and I went through a lot of period of feeling bad about this and being like, I'm a disappointment. I'm the family disappointment. Like and I'm like, I went through that, and I think it's a normal part of like going through
Well,
this
of course it
process.
is.
But man, that sucked. It to feel like a failure, and I'm like, I'm not a failure. I'm a great person, like in a lot of ways. And no, like,
That's where the magic happens. Of course, in my coaching practice, talking to lots of people, one of the things that helps is when you start realizing that no, you're not the disappointment to them.
yeah,
They have disappointed you.
yeah,
That they have not given you what they were supposed to give as parents. They have failed on so many fundamental levels of giving their child what you, if you were ever a parent, would really desire to give your child. And it doesn't mean they're bad people. They're just severely misled. They don't have the tools. They've been kept from tools. They
yeah,
themselves don't want to go find the tools.
yeah.
And so there's a lot there. They're just hamstrung in a lot of ways. And so we just can't get what we want from them because they don't have it to give.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said before, hurt people, and they're both been hurt. They both of my parents have been through trauma as
Sure.
childhood trauma and adult trauma. And I spent a lot of time being angry at them for not understanding, but then at the same time, I'm like, I can't change their mind. I can't do any of that. Like that's not on me. Like
No.
that's not on me. I'm grateful for some aspects of my childhood, and looking back, like it did seem really great. And I do have some good memories of childhood, but like
Of course.
there's a lot of things that I wish had to happen differently. Like I don't know, like what we were doing half the time. Um, I just, yeah, I just getting rid of that guilt. I carried a lot of guilt with me for a long time because I knew that I wasn't going to go back to being a witness, but I felt bad about it because that was my family culture, that was my family heritage, and so
Right.
um, it was actually really, really great. I think it was even this year that I started realizing that I'm a cycle breaker in a different way with the witnesses. Like
Yes,
I'm gonna
you
be the
are.
last one in my family to have gotten baptized, and to be afraid of breaking a cycle to go to being excited to break a cycle is like exciting for me.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's gonna end here. Like my cousins, the last of my like immediate cousins have left, and I don't see any of my other cousins getting baptized. So I'm hopeful that this is it. Um, yeah,
So it's one thing to run from something that's unhealthy. It's another thing to know where you're going or
mm,
what you're running to. So you're not trying to predict the future or anything, but for you, what are you? So you talked about how you were really excited about in your new life, you can exercise unconditional love, which
Mhm.
we'll just call love because the other is just control. So you can
Right.
actually love people today.
Yeah.
So what do you love about your life today? What is it that you're into today? And are there things that you do have as hopes for the future?
Yeah. Some of my closest friends are LGBTQ friends I would never have been friends with as a Jehovah's Witness, because you're not allowed to do that. And those they're just some of like the best people I've ever met in my entire life. And I love to see them on holidays. I love to see them just I'm going with them on Monday. Like I see them all the time. And my roommate too, it's a great life for people that like it it's just so great. It's so great to be able to have people in your life that you wouldn't have had otherwise. When I don't know what I would do without them. Like I really can't imagine my life without them. And then to just think about how much they're missing out on. Ooh, how much the witnesses are missing out on by like being stuck in this prototype world that they put themselves in. They're just missing out on so much. It's such a beautiful, like, yes, there's a lot of crappy aspects to life, but man,
That's everybody's life.
that's
Yeah.
everybody, and it's freaking beautiful out here. Like you can see people. You don't have to ask them what their sexual orientation is before you become friends with them. You don't have to ask them their political ideology or if they are political, if they're neutral. Like you don't have to do those things to have people in your life, and that's great because there's so much power in stories of so many people and experience of so many people that like it's great. The future looks bright for me. I'm applying to grad school soon, and I'm gonna get my master's and hopefully be a therapist. That's what I want to do. That's something that really resonated with me while I was going through therapy. And then my experience working with teenagers and young adults, like that's going to be the age range I want to work with. So I'm stoked. I'm really excited for the future. I have a great life. Like, of course, it's not perfect. There's a lot of challenges. Like everybody has like health challenges, money challenges, all these things that would still happen if I was a Jehovah's Witness. Like that doesn't.
Yeah.
My life didn't get infinitely worse. People are always like, I remember people were like, "Oh, they disassociated. They're taking the easy way out," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's not the easy way out. Like, why do you say these things? Like,
I
clearly,
hate that so much.
okay.
You're taking the easy way out, or you just want to go out there and sin.
Yeah,
Um, Look,
nope,
I'll put my life up against any Jehovah's Witness
mm,
life as far as how they perceive morality. I haven't gone out and wild out. My life is, but I mean, if anybody wants to go do other things,
yeah,
cool, and
yeah,
I wholeheartedly support them in doing what they want to
yeah,
do. But I live the way I want to live, but I get to choose that today
yeah, yeah.
and make those decisions. But it's not easy to lose everybody that you've ever known in your entire life. It's
No,
not easy to. I mean, for me, I'm an atheist today. Uh, I like being an atheist today, but it wasn't easy to lose my faith. It was
mm,
my identity. It's how I
yeah,
saw the world. It's everything that I thought was going to be my future. That's not easy.
no,
For me, I have to be intellectually honest with myself and say, I don't see evidence for those things. Therefore, I can't espouse them or pursue them or believe in them. But it was horrible to have all of that crumble. The
yep,
things that were just the candy from my brain that were making me feel good in the moment, even though they
yeah,
weren't long lasting, I had to let go of them, and it wasn't fun. And I don't think Jehovah's Witnesses, they're the ones taking the easy route, just
yeah.
sticking in their day to day or whatever, and
What to do and then doing the things.
yeah, turning their
And
brains off, not being engaged with life. I mean,
yeah,
it's difficult in its own way as
yeah,
well. And that's really why it's not ever fair or fun to start comparing and contrasting difficulties. It's all hard
it's
and
all
it's
hard.
all right.
But like, it's like, yeah, it's the opportunities to be who you are
Yeah.
is there and like take it because it's so worth it. And it's not like, yeah, yeah, so worth
You
it.
only get one life that you can prove and that you
Yeah,
know of. Shouldn't
Yeah.
you live it as who you are? If you're doing
Yeah.
anything other than that,
Yeah. And like you said,
what a
it's
waste.
too, because it's like, it's not only like losing the people in your life and like your memories are tainted, like everything is kind of messed up after you like wake up and understand, but it's also like a loss of your future in what you thought your future was going to be. Like I was like,
Absolutely.
convinced I was going to pioneer until I died and then wake up in paradise.
Yep.
Um, and that was, I was fully, every part of my fiber in my whole soul believed that.
Mhm.
And that was just like, oh, guess I have to completely reframe my entire way of thinking and life. And that's really hard because you have, it's just like all your marbles just got thrown out. You have to like put more in there. Like literally you feel like you're going a little crazy. I felt like that. I felt like I was going a little crazy. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I believe. I just know that I can't be there. I can't do that because that's not right. It's not for me. It's wrong. It's a lie.
Yeah. 30-year-old me, or maybe even 35. I mean, I left when I was 38. So maybe even 35-year-old me, even though I was somewhat waking up, 35-year-old me could never imagine being where I am today. And 47-year-old me today has a really hard time fathoming that I was once where I was at 35.
Yep.
It's two opposites. It's this weird mirror image that's reversed, and it's
Yeah.
very strange to look back on and to say, "Wow, that was me."
Yeah.
Yeah, sure was.
Yeah. I recently found a picture of myself at Pioneer School,
Oh wow.
and I was like, who is that? Like, because I don't see myself as the same person. Like,
Uh,
yes, I'm the same person, and yes, I went through experiences, and a lot of them, like, I could, there's so many things that we could have talked about today, but like didn't. But there's so many things that I should not have had to go through. Like,
yeah.
and I'm just like, wow, that person did that, and I'm like, but that person is still me. So now I'm just like, okay, well, we're gonna take everything that happens and everything good and bad, and that's still me. It's okay to
Mhm.
be me, and everything's okay. Like, be yourself. That's just what I learned from the entire experience. Is that hey, it's okay to be yourself, and it's also okay to have people not disagree with you, because really it's just reverse engineering the way that they teach you to think. Because they teach you don't care about what other people think because you're doing what's right for Jehovah. But now it's like don't care what other people think because you're doing what's right for you and for the people that you love and care about. And that's a really big deal when you can get that mind shift. Because it's not like, of course other people matter to you. It's your life, but man, it's good to be you. Good, even if you don't think this about yourself, because there's ups and downs with this, like what I would tell people is like just it's gonna be great one day. Like you're gonna wake up and feel like you and feel like things are not going to always be easy. Sometimes it's going to be harder than it ever was, but man, it's great. Don't give it up if you get it.
If you'd like some extra content, if you'd like to learn more about our guests today, maybe even have an opportunity to connect further with them, you can do so by joining the back room tier at patreon.com/shunned.